fired for being black. Then he saved the boss's daughter. Jamal could still feel the warmth of the coffee cup he hadn't even finished when the director called him in. It was a Friday afternoon at Langston Engineering, the kind of place where voices hushed whenever the director, Mr. Wallace, walked the corridor in his crisp blue suit and the scent of expensive cologne marked his passing. Jamal, with his quiet diligence, had spent 3 years in that office, early mornings, precise designs, and coffee breaks spent quietly reviewing project files near the glass window overlooking the city. That day, Jamal had worn his brown cardigan over a black-collared shirt, thinking nothing of it. He was finishing a design review when Mr. Wallace's assistant tapped him on the shoulder. "He wants to see you." Jamal entered the office, nodding politely. Wallace didn't look up immediately, scribbling something on a pad with a gold pen. The window behind him framed the skyline, light falling on the clean lines of the shelves, the certificates in heavy frames, the polished wooden table. Finally, Wallace looked up, clearing his throat. "Jamal, take a seat." There was a pause, a silence that pressed down on Jamal's shoulders. Wallace's eyes flickered, scanning Jamal's face as if looking for a crack in the calm. "We're going to have to let you go," Wallace said, in that flat tone people use when they want to sound like it isn't personal. Jamal blinked once, twice. "May I ask why?" Wallace shifted in his chair, glancing at the door before leaning back. "We're restructuring. We need people who align with the culture here. I've noticed you. Keep to yourself. Don't really blend with the clients." Jamal's jaw tightened. "My performance has been consistent." Wallace's eyes hardened, just for a second, before softening into that practiced, polite smile. "It's not about performance. It's about fit." Jamal heard the words beneath the words. He saw the way Wallace's eyes had flicked down at his skin, his cardigan, his carefully combed hair, and the unspoken idea that maybe Jamal's presence made clients uncomfortable. That maybe it was easier to let him go quietly, to replace him with someone who fit. Jamal left the office carrying the weight of the silent judgment, a cardboard box filled with sketches, notes, and the coffee cup he never finished. As he walked through the open-plan office, he could feel the glances, some sympathetic, most looking away, pretending not to see. Outside, the sky was bruised with the color of approaching rain, and Jamal stood there, the box in his arms, wondering if the world would ever see him for who he was, not for what they feared he might be. He did not know then that a year later, he would meet Wallace again, but not as a man holding a cardboard box. He would meet him on the side of a road, kneeling on hot asphalt, trying to keep a young woman breathing. And that moment would change everything. A year can pass slowly when your dreams are interrupted. For Jamal, days blurred into one another as he worked 2 part-time jobs, delivering packages for a courier service in the mornings, helping at a community mechanic shop in the evenings, where he used his engineering precision to diagnose engine troubles others missed. It wasn't what he had planned, but it was honest work, and it kept him moving. Sometimes, late at night, he would take out his old sketches, the designs he once dreamed would change how the city moved, eco-friendly transit hubs, modular bridge systems, plans he had drawn carefully in the quiet glow of late hours. He would trace the lines with his finger, feeling a tug deep in his chest, a reminder of who he was beneath the tiredness and quiet resignation. On Sundays, he volunteered with a local youth program, teaching kids how to repair bikes, patch tires, and keep chains clean. He told them the details mattered, every bolt, every angle, and they would laugh when he'd say, "Precision is kindness, even in small things." Jamal had stopped checking the Langston Engineering website. He had stopped hoping Wallace would call, admitting they had made a mistake. But the world has a strange way of circling back. It was a late summer afternoon when it happened, the kind where heat presses on your skin and the air tastes of dust. Jamal was driving his delivery route, the hum of the van steady beneath him, windows rolled down to catch any passing breeze. He was about to turn off onto Maple Avenue when he saw it, a white sedan, crumpled against a light pole, smoke rising lazily from the hood, the metallic scent of burnt rubber filling the air. A crowd had gathered, but they stood back, afraid, hesitant. Jamal stopped the van, heart thudding as he jumped out. The world shrank to the harsh screech of an alarm from the car and the muffled sobbing from inside. He didn't know her yet, didn't know her name or the way the world would tilt when he realized whose daughter she was. All he saw was a young woman, blood trickling down her forehead, her eyes wide and dazed as she struggled to unbuckle her seatbelt. Hey, it's okay," Jamal said, voice steady as he pulled open the crushed door. ignoring the heat pressing against his arms. "I've got you." In that moment, there was no past, no office, no cardboard box. Only the scent of gasoline, the warmth of the asphalt burning through his jeans as he knelt, and the steady rhythm of his breath as he checked her pulse, tilted her head gently, and kept her talking. "What's your name?" he asked, as sirens wailed in the distance, a promise that help was coming. "Lily," she whispered, tears mixing with the blood on her cheek. "You're going to be okay, Lily," Jamal said, pressing a towel from his delivery van against a wound on her arm, his hands precise, his movements calm. "Stay with me." And she did. Jamal did not know, not yet, that the man sprinting from the crowd toward the wreck would be Mr. Wallace, tie loose, eyes wild, calling out the name of his daughter over and over. Not yet. The paramedics arrived in a rush of blue uniforms and clipped instructions, their radios crackling as they set to work. Jamal stepped back, letting them slide in with their equipment, the metallic scent of blood and the sweetness of leaking coolant mixing in the hot air. Lily's eyes found Jamal's one last time as they lifted her onto the stretcher. "Thank you," she whispered, her voice so soft it nearly disappeared under the wail of the sirens. He nodded, swallowing the tightness in his throat, sweat dripping down his temple, hands still shaking faintly as adrenaline drained from his body. That was when he heard the footsteps. "Lily, Lily." A man pushed through the small crowd, face pale, eyes frantic. His tie flapped loosely, and his polished shoes skidded against the asphalt as he stumbled toward the stretcher. "Dad." Lily's voice cracked, relief flooding her features. Jamal froze. It was Wallace. For a moment, the world seemed to tilt. The bright sky, too harsh as memories of that office, came flooding back. The polite smile that wasn't truly polite, the sterile language of culture fit, the quiet finality of that day Jamal carried his box out under those same blue skies. Wallace was here, in the same crumpled, helpless way Jamal once felt as he stood in the corridor, while people pretended not to see him leaving. Wallace grasped his daughter's hand, tears streaking down his face, his voice shaking as he whispered, "It's okay, baby. You're safe." Then Wallace looked up, eyes scanning the paramedics, the bystanders, until they landed on Jamal. And he froze. Their eyes locked, and for a moment, neither of them moved. Jamal's hands were still stained with Lily's blood, pressed against the towel he had used to stop the bleeding, trembling slightly as the tension in the air became a quiet, heavy weight between them. Wallace's lips parted as if to speak, but no words came out. His eyes darted down to Jamal's hands, then back to Jamal's face, recognition and disbelief swirling with something else, something like shame. Jamal took a step back, his breath steady, his face unreadable. He did not need to say anything. Everything had already been said in that silence, in the echo of that office, in the way Wallace now looked at the man he once dismissed as unworthy, unfit, replaceable. The paramedics wheeled Lily toward the ambulance, Wallace's hand gripping hers as he followed, his head turning once more to look at Jamal, eyes glistening in the harsh sunlight. For the first time, Wallace truly saw him. Hospitals have a way of slowing time, trapping people in moments they cannot control. Jamal sat on a hard plastic chair in the emergency room hallway, the white fluorescent lights buzzing softly above, the smell of antiseptic stinging his nose. His delivery van was still parked outside, packages waiting, but none of it mattered right now. A nurse had asked him to stay for a statement, to explain what he saw, what he did. So Jamal waited, hands clasped, traces of dried blood under his fingernails, the scent of gasoline and heat still lingering on his clothes. Across the hallway, Wallace sat slumped in a chair, elbows on his knees, head in his hands. His tailored suit was wrinkled, the cuff of his shirt stained with Lily's blood where he had gripped her hand too tightly. Every so often, Wallace would lift his head and glance at Jamal, eyes searching, unsure whether to look away or to hold the gaze. Once, their eyes met. Jamal held it for a moment, his expression calm, unflinching. Wallace's lips trembled, and he quickly looked down at the floor, as if ashamed of what he might find in Jamal's eyes. The automatic doors slid open, letting in the warm air from outside, and Jamal felt the contrast sharply, the world moving, while in here, they were suspended between fear and hope. A nurse stepped out, calling Wallace's name. He sprang to his feet, desperate, eyes wide. "She's stable," the nurse said gently. "She's asking for you." Wallace's shoulders crumpled with relief, and his hand flew to his mouth as a soft sob escaped him. He looked around, disoriented, before his gaze landed on Jamal once more. For a moment, Wallace simply stared, lips moving wordlessly. Then, as if pulled by something beyond pride, he took a slow, hesitant step toward Jamal. I don't know how to—" Wallace's voice broke, the words hanging in the sterile air. Jamal stood, his eyes steady, letting the silence speak for him. Wallace's eyes glistened. You saved her," he whispered, a crack in his voice, the weight of those words pressing down on him like gravity. Jamal nodded once, his face calm, but a storm of exhaustion and quiet ache moved beneath the surface. Wallace's hand twitched, as if to reach out, but he stopped himself, clutching it to his chest. His mouth opened and closed before he finally managed to say, "Thank you." The words were simple, but they carried everything: the fear, the gratitude, and the silent weight of the past, unspoken but present between them. Jamal took a slow breath. "Take care of her," he said quietly, his voice firm but not unkind. Wallace nodded, his face breaking, tears falling freely now as he turned toward the hallway where his daughter waited. Jamal sat back down as Wallace walked away, the tension in his shoulders easing, but only slightly. The lights above still buzzed, and the world outside continued, but in that waiting room, something had shifted. Jamal leaned back against the wall, closing his eyes for a moment, letting the quiet fill him as he prepared to step back into the world, forever changed, but holding his dignity firmly, like a quiet flame in the dark. That night, Wallace sat alone in Lily's hospital room, the rhythmic beeping of the monitor steady in the dim light. Lily was asleep, her face pale but calm, her breathing soft against the hum of machines. Wallace's hands trembled as he held her hand, his thumb brushing over the bandage on her wrist. His mind wasn't quiet. It raced in loops, images of the crash, the blood, her trembling voice, and Jamal's steady hands holding her, calming her. He could not shake the look on Jamal's face, calm and clear, even when their eyes met. He remembered how Jamal had stood in his office a year ago, the hurt hidden beneath dignity, the quiet question, "And what exactly makes you think I'm not your target customer?" Wallace had dismissed him then, quietly, politely, believing he was protecting the culture of the company, that unwritten, unspoken idea that some people simply didn't fit. He had chosen comfort over fairness. Now, watching his daughter sleep, alive because of the man he had cast aside, Wallace saw himself reflected in the dark glass of the hospital window, a man who had built his success on knowing how to make decisions quickly, to trust his judgment, to move without hesitation. But how many of those decisions had been wrong, hidden under the illusion of professionalism? Wallace's breath fogged the glass as he leaned forward, pressing his forehead against it. Guilt pressed heavily against his ribs, a weight that would not ease. What does it mean, he wondered, when the man you dismiss saves the person you love most in this world? Across the city, Jamal sat on the edge of his bed in his small apartment, untying his boots, exhaustion heavy in his bones. The van was parked downstairs, the deliveries completed late, a quiet apology to customers tucked under doorways. The scent of gasoline and blood still lingered in his mind. Jamal's hands hovered over the sink, scrubbing the traces of the day away as the water ran pink for a moment before clearing. He watched it swirl down the drain, feeling the tension leave his shoulders. He did not think of Wallace with anger, but the memory of that day in the office came back, how it felt to be judged, to be reduced to a poor fit, how it felt to carry the weight of silent prejudice home, alone. But today, Jamal had chosen to act, to help, because it was who he was, not for approval, not for gratitude. As he lay down, the hum of the city outside, Jamal closed his eyes and whispered a quiet prayer of thanks for Lily's life, letting the day go, preparing to rise again in the morning. 3 days after the accident, Lily was discharged, her arm in a sling, a bruise still shadowing her cheek. Wallace walked her out of the hospital, his hand hovering protectively near her back, guilt tucked in every glance he gave her. "Dad," Lily said softly as they reached the car, her voice steady despite the soreness, "who was that man who pulled me out?" Wallace's hand froze on the car door handle. He was someone I knew," Wallace replied, voice low, unsure how to explain to his daughter that the man who saved her life was the same man he had once quietly discarded. Lily turned her eyes toward him, waiting. "He worked for me," Wallace finally admitted, his throat tightening, "and I let him go, Because I thought it was the right decision for the company. I didn't see him. Not really. Lily studied her father, her eyes sharp, seeing more than he wished she could see. You need to thank him properly, Dad. You need to do more. Wallace felt the words strike deep, deeper than any polite thank you could reach. The drive home was silent except for the hum of tires on pavement and the quiet rhythm of Lily's breathing. That evening, Wallace sat in his home office, the soft glow of the desk lamp casting long shadows across the certificates on the wall. His reflection in the darkened window looked smaller than it used to, the crisp edges of his confidence dulled by the quiet weight of truth. He opened his laptop, searching Jamal's name in the old employee files. It felt invasive, but it was the only way he knew how to find him. There, Jamal's staff photo appeared, calm eyes, a slight, polite smile, wearing the same cardigan Wallace had silently judged that day. A memory flashed, Wallace's own words. We need people who align with the culture here. He closed his eyes, the shame rising like a tide. Wallace drafted an email, fingers hesitating over the keyboard. Subject: Thank you. Jamal, I wanted to reach out to thank you for what you did for Lily. I owe you more than I can express. I would like to speak with you if you're willing. I know I have no right to ask this of you, but I need to say some things in person. Please let me know if you would be open to meeting. Wallace. He hovered over the send button, fear and pride warring inside him. Then, with a deep breath, he clicked it. Across the city, Jamal was closing the shop, wiping grease from his hands, preparing for another evening of lesson plans for the youth bike program. His phone buzzed in his pocket, the glow of the screen catching his eye. He read the message once, then again, the quiet of the shop pressing around him. He placed the phone down, exhaling slowly, letting the moment settle before deciding what to do next. They met at a small cafe near the park, the kind with chipped mugs and handwritten chalk menus, where the air smelled of coffee and warm bread, and the world outside moved slowly under the summer sun. Jamal arrived first, choosing a seat by the window where light pooled on the table, illuminating the faded wood grain. He sat with his hands clasped, calm but guarded, watching people pass by, mothers pushing strollers, teens laughing, the quiet, everyday life he loved. Wallace arrived a few minutes later, his posture stiff, a man who had spent a lifetime in control but now felt unmoored. He spotted Jamal and hesitated at the door before forcing himself forward. Each step waited. Jamal, Wallace said softly, almost questioning if he had the right to say his name. Jamal nodded, his face calm. Have a seat. Wallace sat down, his hands restless, folding and unfolding, unable to find stillness. For a moment, neither spoke, the quiet between them filled only by the clink of cups and the hiss of the espresso machine behind the counter. I don't know how to start, Wallace finally said, his voice rough. Then just say what you need to say, Jamal replied, his voice steady, but not unkind. Wallace swallowed, his eyes dropping to the table. You saved Lily's life. I can't express what that means to me as a father. He paused, his breath catching. And I know I'm the last person who deserves your kindness, especially after what I did. Jamal's gaze remained fixed on him, allowing the discomfort to settle fully between them. Wallace's eyes glistened. I fired you because I made assumptions about you. About who you were, about what you were worth, about what clients would think. His voice cracked. I didn't see you. I chose the easy prejudice, hidden under company culture. Jamal's jaw tightened, memories flickering, the humiliation of packing his things, the quiet sting of the silent judgment in the hallway. Why are you telling me this now? Jamal asked, his voice low. Wallace looked up, his eyes pleading, raw. Because I need you to know that I see it now. I see what I did. I see what I've been part of. And it took you saving Lily's life for me to finally confront that. The cafe felt impossibly quiet as Wallace's words sank in. Jamal took a breath, steadying himself. Do you think I saved Lily so you would learn a lesson? Wallace's eyes widened. No, that's not what I... Jamal held up a hand, calm but firm. I helped her because it was the right thing to do, because I don't get to choose when to care about people, even people who didn't care about me. Wallace's tears finally fell, his shoulders trembling as he wiped his face with a shaking hand. I'm so sorry, Jamal, Wallace whispered. The words hung in the air, real, imperfect, the beginning of accountability, not its completion. Jamal sat back, letting the silence hold, letting Wallace feel the weight of what had passed. Now, Jamal said quietly, what are you going to do with what you see? Wallace looked at him, tears on his cheeks, realizing that this moment was not about earning forgiveness, but about what came next. Wallace returned to the office the next morning, the glass doors reflecting his tired face, the same building where he once walked confidently past Jamal without a second thought. Now, every step echoed differently. He gathered his senior team in the conference room, the morning light slanting across the polished table. The room fell silent as Wallace stood at the head, papers in hand that trembled slightly as he placed them down. "I need to speak to you all about something important," Wallace began, his voice firm but heavy. "It's about the culture of this company and about me." Brows furrowed, glances exchanged, but no one spoke. Wallace took a breath, letting the quiet press on him. "A year ago, I let someone go, Jamal. Not because of his performance, but because of my assumptions about who fit here. I hid my bias under the word culture. I want to be clear. It was wrong." The words were sharp, cutting into the hush of the room. "I'm telling you this because I can't ask for this company to change if I won't face it myself," Wallace continued. His voice cracked, but he didn't stop. "This company will not continue like this. We will conduct a thorough review of our hiring and promotion practices. We will partner with an external diversity consultant. We will hold training on unconscious bias, not the checkbox kind, but real, uncomfortable work." Someone shifted in their seat, but still, no one interrupted. "And I want you to know why this is happening," Wallace added, his eyes glistening. "Because a man I wronged saved my daughter's life, and he owed me nothing, but he gave her everything." Silence. A young engineer in the corner, a black woman who often kept to herself in meetings, looked up at Wallace, her eyes sharp but softer than before. Wallace swallowed. "If anyone here cannot support the work of making this company a place where everyone is seen and valued, you need to reconsider whether this is the place for you." He let the silence stretch, the weight of accountability hanging in the air. Across town, Jamal was at the community workshop, tightening the handlebars on a child's bike as the boy beamed, holding out a sticker to decorate it. "You did it, Mr. Jamal," the boy said, excitement bubbling in his voice. Jamal smiled, wiping a smear of grease on his rag. "You did it, champ. I just helped." His phone buzzed, a message from an unknown number. "Wallace here. We've started the changes. It won't fix what I did, but I wanted you to know we're trying." Jamal looked at the message, breathing in the warm, dusty scent of the shop, the laughter of kids echoing in the small space. He placed the phone down, turned to the child, and said, "All right, let's ride." Because Jamal's life was not waiting for apologies to define it. His life was built in small moments of kindness, of precision, of care, regardless of who was watching. At Langston Engineering, the changes were slow, and not everyone was comfortable. Some employees rolled their eyes during the new workshops, muttering that these things were just for show. Others squirmed in their seats when uncomfortable conversations arose about bias in hiring, promotion, and how clients were chosen. But Wallace stood firm, attending every session, never hiding at the back, never looking at his phone to escape the discomfort. He listened when the young engineer who rarely spoke in meetings described how she felt invisible during project discussions. He listened when a Latino technician shared how clients often assumed he was just there to move boxes, not to design systems. Each story was a mirror Wallace could not look away from, reflecting the quiet culture he had allowed to grow under his watch. Meanwhile, changes took root. Job postings were rewritten, removing coded language that shut people out. A mentorship program launched for employees from underrepresented backgrounds. Pay audits were conducted, revealing inequities that Wallace immediately addressed. Staff meetings began with intentional check-ins, space for voices that were once ignored to speak up. There was pushback, as there always is when change arrives. A senior manager resigned, claiming it was too much politics, and Wallace accepted the resignation without anger, knowing some people would rather leave than grow. But for those who stayed, something shifted. Conversations that had once been whispers over lunch now happened openly. People noticed who was in the room, who wasn't, and why. Across the city, Jamal continued his quiet work, building bikes with children, repairing engines with precision, mentoring teens on how to read blueprints, and reminding them that every bolt mattered. One afternoon, as he was packing up tools, Lily arrived at the workshop. Her sling was gone, though a faint scar still traced her arm. She stood nervously at the door, a paper bag in her hand. "I brought lunch," she said softly. Jamal looked up from the workbench, his calm eyes meeting hers, a smile warming his tired face. "You didn't have to do that." "I know," Lily replied, stepping forward, but I wanted to. They sat on the curb outside the workshop, sharing sandwiches as the neighborhood kids rode past on their bikes, calling out to Jamal with waves and laughter. The air smelled of warm asphalt and fresh-cut grass, the ordinary beauty of a day alive and unhurried. "Thank you for what you did," Lily said, her voice steady, "and for giving my dad a chance to see what he needed to see." Jamal nodded, taking a quiet breath. "Sometimes, life gives us a chance to see things differently," he replied, "but it's up to us what we do after we see." They sat in silence, the sunlight soft on their faces, letting the moment be enough. Because change isn't always loud. Sometimes, it arrives quietly, through a second chance, a conversation, a child's laughter in a workshop that smells of oil and hope. Months passed, and the world kept moving, traffic lights blinking on quiet dawn streets, children laughing on corners, the city humming its everyday rhythm. At Langston Engineering, Wallace's office now had a small framed photo on the shelf behind his desk. It wasn't of a building he'd helped design or an award he'd received. It was a photo of Lily, smiling, her arm around Jamal outside the workshop, her bike balanced between them, the sun setting behind them in gold. Wallace often glanced at that photo during long meetings, reminding himself why discomfort was worth enduring, why policies on paper meant nothing without living them out, day by day, decision by decision. He still made mistakes. There were days when he caught himself slipping into old habits, days when doubt crept in. But each time, he paused, choosing to listen rather than react, to ask rather than assume. Meanwhile, Jamal continued his quiet work, his life filled with the small, honest moments that made him feel alive, the satisfying click of a wrench tightening the final bolt, the laughter of a child learning to ride for the first time, the glow of streetlights on his walk home after a long day. He still sketched designs at night, not for anyone else, but for himself, a habit that reminded him he was allowed to dream, even when the world told him otherwise. And sometimes, those designs became weekend projects at the workshop, where teenagers learned not only how to build, but how to believe in the small details that mattered. One morning, as dawn light painted the city in soft pinks and oranges, Jamal locked up the shop and stepped outside, taking a deep breath of cool, clean air. Across the street, Wallace was waiting, coffee in hand, offering a quiet nod. No suits today, just a simple shirt, tired eyes, and a man willing to learn. They sat on the curb, like old friends who had been strangers for too long, sharing the silence that needed no explanation. "Thank you," Wallace said again, but this time, it wasn't just for saving Lily. Jamal nodded, taking the coffee, feeling the warmth seep into his palms. "Keep doing the work," he replied, his voice calm, steady. "I will," Wallace promised. And as the sun lifted higher, they sat there, two men changed by the collision of a moment they never wanted, transformed by the choices that followed. Because real change isn't loud. It lives in apologies backed by action, in quiet choices repeated until they become a new way of living, in the ordinary mornings where people see each other, truly see each other, and decide to build something better. And for Jamal, it was enough, because he knew who he was. And now, Wallace did too. Thank you for watching. Subscribe me and hit the notification bell to not miss new stories. Bye.